The galaxy knew silence before it knew screaming. For 16,000 years, the Celestial Assembly had governed 200 star systems with wisdom earned through ages of peaceful contemplation. 23 ancient civilizations had woven themselves into a tapestry of harmony so perfect that war had become nothing more than a cautionary tale whispered to children. The Assembly believed they had transcended violence, risen above the primitive urges that plagued younger species. They wore their pacifism like a crown, their diplomatic prowess like armor that could never be pierced. They were wrong. Captain Dante Reeves stood on the observation deck of the UNS Relentless, watching distant nebulae paint the darkness with colors that had no names in human languages. He was 38 years old, with shoulders that carried the weight of 300 combat missions and eyes that had witnessed both the beauty and brutality of the cosmos. His crew knew him as a man who smiled rarely but meant it when he did, who spoke softly but commanded absolute respect. Behind him, the bridge hummed with quiet efficiency. His people moved like clockwork, each one a master of their craft. Earth had reached for the stars 250 years ago, stumbling into a universe already claimed by beings who looked upon humanity with barely concealed contempt. The Celestial Assembly had reviewed mankind's application for membership with the enthusiasm of parents watching a child play with matches. Their verdict came wrapped in diplomatic language, but the message was clear. Humans were too young, too aggressive, too stained with the blood of their own kind. Come back when you have learned to put away your weapons and embrace enlightenment. The rejection stung, not because humanity needed the Assembly's approval, but because it confirmed what many humans already suspected. In the eyes of the ancient races, mankind would always be the barbarian at the gate. So humanity turned inward, focused on their own worlds, their own expansion. They built colonies on harsh planets where other species saw only wasteland. They pushed their technology forward, driven by the stubborn determination that had carried them from caves to starships. They did not forget the Assembly's rejection, but neither did they dwell on it. The universe was vast, and there was too much work to be done. Lieutenant Felix Park appeared at Dante's side, his tablet glowing with new data. The young officer was brilliant with numbers, capable of analyzing tactical situations faster than the ship's computer. His dark eyes reflected concern as he cleared his throat. "Captain, we have an unusual contact approaching from Assembly space. Single vessel, diplomatic designation, broadcasting emergency protocols on every frequency." Dante turned from the viewport, his attention sharpening. The Assembly never ventured this close to human territory. Their ships avoided mankind's borders like nobles avoiding a slum. Identification? Telmaran diplomatic cruiser, Felix reported. The signature matches Ambassador Voranth Kale. He was one of the officials who voted against our membership application. A wry smile touched Dante's lips. The irony was not lost on him. Interesting timing for a social call. What kind of emergency? Felix's expression darkened. They are being pursued, sir. Multiple contacts following their trajectory. The sensor readings are unlike anything in our database. The pursuing vessels appear to be organic, and they are moving fast. Dante moved to the command console, his fingers dancing across holographic displays. The tactical screen showed the fleeing diplomatic ship as a bright point of light, with a swarm of crimson dots converging on it like predators surrounding wounded prey. Behind the immediate pursuers, the sensors detected something that made his blood run cold. A vast cloud of similar contacts, stretching across space like a living darkness. How many? Initial count suggests thousands, Felix said quietly. And that is just what we can detect. The swarm extends beyond our sensor range. Dante studied the display, his tactical mind already running calculations. Whatever was chasing the Telmaran vessel represented a threat unlike anything humanity had faced. The organic signatures suggested biological ships, which meant adaptive technology, learning capabilities, and possibly a hive consciousness. Dangerous in ways that conventional fleets were not. Time until they reach our border? 18 minutes at current speed. Dante activated the ship-wide communication channel, his voice carrying to every corner of the Relentless. "All hands, this is the captain. We have a diplomatic vessel requesting asylum and a hostile force in pursuit. Battle stations. I want weapons hot and shields at maximum. This is not a drill." The ship transformed around him. Klaxons wailed their urgent song. Blast doors sealed. Marines rushed to their deployment stations. The Relentless was a warship, built during humanity's expansion years when every new star system might hide threats. She carried enough firepower to crack a small moon, and her crew had trained for every imaginable combat scenario. The Telmaran vessel breached the border of human space with minutes to spare, its elegant hull scorched and bleeding atmosphere from a dozen breaches. Behind it, the pursuing swarm slowed, as if considering the invisible line that separated territories. Dante watched as the organic ships clustered at the boundary, pulsing with bioluminescence that reminded him of deep-sea predators. "Open a channel to the Telmaran ship," he ordered. The main screen flickered, and Ambassador Voranth Kale appeared. The Telmaran was tall and impossibly thin, with skin that shifted colors like oil on water and eyes that saw in spectrums beyond human perception. He was ancient by human standards, having served his people for over 4 centuries. Now he looked diminished, his chromatic skin flickering erratically with what Dante recognized as fear. "Human vessel," Vorantha's voice carried the melodic quality of his species, though the notes were discordant with stress. "I invoke the universal right of sanctuary. My ship is damaged. My crew is dying. I beg for your protection." Dante leaned forward in his command chair, his expression neutral. "Ambassador Kale. I remember you from the membership hearings. You spoke quite eloquently about humanity's unsuitability for civilized company." Vorantha's skin flushed with colors that might have been shame. "I did. I was wrong. I was a fool who mistook peace for strength and diplomacy for survival. What is chasing you?" "The Devourers," Voranth said, and his voice cracked with a terror that transcended species. "They appeared at the edge of our territory 3 years ago. We tried to communicate. We tried to negotiate. We tried to understand them." His colors shifted to deep crimson. "They do not communicate. They do not negotiate. They consume. Every world they touch becomes lifeless rock. Every species they encounter becomes food for their endless hunger." The organic ships at the border began to pulse with strange rhythms, their bioluminescent patterns creating hypnotic waves across the darkness. Dante watched them with the careful attention of a predator studying another predator. They were learning, analyzing, probing the invisible barrier between assembly space and human territory. Testing to see if this new prey was worth the effort. "How many worlds have you lost?" Dante asked, his voice cutting through the tension on the bridge. Vorantha's chromatic skin rippled with grief. 47 confirmed. Another 32 have gone silent. The Devourers adapt to everything we throw at them. Our energy weapons were perfected over 10,000 years. They slice through asteroids like paper. The Devourers absorbed the first volley and learned to disperse the beams harmlessly. His colors shifted to darker shades. "Our gravity wells could crush battleships. They reconfigured their organic hulls to thrive under pressure. Our molecular disruptors were supposed to be impossible to counter. They evolved resistance in less than 6 hours." Lieutenant Felix Park pulled up data streams, comparing the assembly's reported losses with the size of the approaching swarm. His face went pale. "Captain, if the ambassador's numbers are accurate, the Devourers have consumed a population of over 200 billion sentient beings. The biomass required to create a swarm this size matches those casualty figures." Dante felt his stomach tighten. 200 billion souls, converted into living weapons. The scale of the atrocity was beyond human experience. Even Earth's worst wars had never approached such wholesale slaughter. "Your military response?" Dante asked Voranth. The ambassador's colors flickered with bitter resignation. We have no military. Not truly. The Assembly maintains defense fleets, but they are meant for crowd control during civil disputes, for protecting trade routes from pirates. We have not fought a real war in 12,000 years. We have forgotten how. He leaned closer to the screen, his alien eyes fixed on Dante with desperate intensity. Our commanders are philosophers who studied ancient battles as academic exercises. Our soldiers are volunteers who joined for prestige and steady pay. Our weapons were designed to minimize casualties and respect life. We built a civilization on the principle that violence was a relic of barbarism. And now the barbarians are the only ones who can save you, Dante said quietly. Yes. Vorantha's colors stabilized into something that looked like determination. The Assembly Council has authorized me to offer humanity full membership, immediate recognition, access to all our technologies and trade networks. We will open our archives, share our scientific knowledge, grant you worlds and resources beyond measure. He paused, his voice dropping. All we ask in return is that you fight for us. That you remember what we have forgotten. Dante turned to his tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Okoye Namdi, a woman whose family had fled wars on 3 different continents before humanity reached the stars. She understood violence not as an academic concept but as a lived reality. Her fingers moved across her console, pulling up projections. Captain, if those things breach our border, we would face the same adaptation problem the Assembly encountered. But we have advantages they do not. Explain, Dante ordered. Okoye brought up holographic displays showing humanity's weapons compared to Assembly technology. The Assembly's weapons are elegant. Each one designed to neutralize threats with minimal collateral damage. They think in terms of surgical strikes. She highlighted human arsenals. We think in terms of overwhelming force. Our missiles carry nuclear warheads because sometimes you need to turn the battlefield into plasma. Our railguns fire depleted uranium slugs at relativistic speeds because kinetic energy does not care about adaptation. Our chemical weapons were banned by the Assembly as cruel, but cruelty is effective when facing an enemy that feels no mercy. Dante studied the projections, seeing the ugly truth laid bare. Humanity had been rejected from the Assembly because they carried weapons designed not to disable but to destroy. Tools meant for total war, created during Earth's bloodiest centuries and refined during the expansion into hostile space. The very qualities that made humans unsuitable for civilized company were exactly what was needed now. We have something else, Felix added quietly. Marines trained in boarding actions. Close-quarters specialists who can clear enemy vessels with plasma cutters and explosive charges. The Assembly has security forces. We have soldiers who understand that sometimes you need to stand in the blood of your enemies and keep fighting until the job is done. Dante looked back at the screen where Voranth waited with the patience of desperation. Behind the ambassador, through the damaged hull of his ship, Dante could see crew members moving frantically to keep their vessel from breaking apart. They were people, alien yes, but still people with lives and families and hopes. And beyond them, at the border, the devourers waited with infinite patience and infinite hunger. I need to contact Fleet Command, Dante said. This decision is beyond my authority. There is no time, Vorantha's colors flashed urgent crimson. The devourers are analyzing your ship's defenses right now. Within hours, they will determine whether you represent a threat or merely another food source. If they decide to attack, your single vessel will not survive. He gestured to something off-screen. I have 1,700 people on this ship. Diplomats, scientists, engineers. All of them will die unless you act now. Dante felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders like a physical burden. The standing orders were clear. Provide humanitarian assistance when possible. Do not engage unknown hostile forces without authorization. Maintain peaceful relations with all spacefaring civilizations. But orders were written for normal circumstances, and nothing about this situation was normal. He thought about the 200 billion beings who had already been consumed. He thought about what would happen if the Devourers decided humanity was weak enough to attack. He thought about the price of peace and the cost of survival. "Helm, move us between the ambassador's ship and the swarm," Dante ordered. "Maximum shields. Weapons free but hold fire unless they cross the border." The Relentless surged forward, her massive bulk positioning between the damaged diplomatic vessel and the waiting predators. On the tactical display, the Devourers' pulsing patterns intensified. They were communicating, Dante realized. Not with words but with biological signals, coordinating their response to this new development. "Captain, we are being scanned," Okoye reported. "Multiple sensor sweeps across all spectrums. They are analyzing our hull composition, our power signatures, our weapon systems." "Let them look," Dante said. "I want them to see what happens when they face a species that never forgot how to bare its teeth." The Devourers' swarm contracted, pulling tighter together. For a moment, Dante thought they might retreat. Then the forward edge of the swarm began to glow with sickly green light. Organic weapons charging, preparing for an attack that would test whether humanity's reputation for violence was earned or merely propaganda. "All batteries, target the lead elements," Dante commanded. "Fire on my mark." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of charging weapons. Every eye was fixed on the tactical display, watching as two very different philosophies of war met at an invisible line in space. The assembly had tried to transcend violence and failed. Humanity had never tried to transcend it, had instead learned to perfect it, to make it into a tool that could be wielded with terrible precision. The Devourers surged forward, crossing the border in a wave of organic fury. Dante's hand came down on the command console. "Fire." The Relentless spoke with the voice of human rage. The void between stars erupted into violence so pure it seemed to burn away the very darkness. The Relentless unleashed her fury with a brutality that would have horrified the Celestial Assembly's peaceful philosophers, and that was precisely the point. Rail guns hammered depleted uranium slugs through space at velocities that turned metal into something approaching pure energy. Each impact shattered organic hulls not with elegant precision but with overwhelming kinetic force that cared nothing for adaptation or evolution. The Devourers had never faced weapons this crude, this savage, this devastatingly simple. Nuclear missiles traced brilliant arcs across the battlefield, their warheads configured not for the clean neutron bursts favored by civilized warfare but for maximum thermal destruction. When they detonated, miniature suns bloomed in the void, their heat so intense that organic matter simply ceased to exist. The Devourers tried to adapt, tried to evolve heat-resistant tissues, but evolution required time and nuclear fire gave them none. Dante watched the tactical display with cold focus as entire sections of the swarm vanished in white-hot fury. This was the warfare that humanity had perfected through centuries of killing each other, now turned against an enemy that threatened all life. "Chemical warheads away," Okoye reported, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding on her screens. The missiles released their payloads, clouds of compounds banned by every civilized treaty in the galaxy. Nerve agents that disrupted biological functions. Corrosives that ate through organic tissue like acid through paper. Toxins designed during Earth's darkest wars when victory mattered more than honor. The Devourers writhed as the chemicals invaded their living hulls, their bioluminescence flickering and dying as their own biology turned against them. But the swarm was vast, and for every Devourer destroyed, 3 more pressed forward. They were learning even now, even as they died. Some began ejecting sections of their hulls, sacrificing parts of themselves to analyze the chemicals and develop resistances. Others clustered together, creating larger masses that could absorb more punishment. The hive mind coordinated their evolution with terrifying speed, adapting to humanity's weapons just as they had adapted to the Assembly's elegant technology. "They are getting smarter," Felix called out, his voice tight with stress. Temperature-resistant strains emerging in the outer clusters. Some are developing ablative layers against the kinetic impacts. Dante leaned forward, his mind racing through tactical options. This was the test, the moment that would determine whether humanity's violence was enough to stand against an enemy that consumed entire civilizations. The assembly had failed because they fought with restraint, with concern for minimizing destruction. Humanity had no such limitations, but even unlimited brutality needed strategy. Launch the boarding pods, Dante ordered. Target the largest cluster formations. I want Marines inside those things. Okoye turned to stare at him. Sir, we have no intelligence on their internal structure. We do not know if humans can even survive in there. Neither do they, Dante said grimly. And that ignorance is the only advantage we have left. Launch the pods. 20 boarding pods erupted from the Relentless, each one carrying 8 Marines in powered combat armor. These were not the dress uniform soldiers who stood guard at embassies. These were warriors who trained for nightmares, who practiced clearing hostile vessels where every corridor might be a trap and every shadow might hide death. They were humanity's answer to the question that civilized species refuse to ask: what happens when talking fails and only violence remains? Sergeant Thomas Chan felt the boarding pod shudder as it punched through the outer membrane of a devourer vessel. His heads-up display flickered with warnings about toxic atmosphere, extreme temperatures, and biological contamination. He ignored them all. The pod's cutting lasers carved an entrance, and then he was through, stepping into an environment that defied description. The interior was not a ship in any recognizable sense. It was alive, pulsing with veins that carried nutrients, walls that breathed, floors that tried to grow around his boots. Stay tight, he commanded his squad. Plasma cutters on anything that moves. We are looking for neural clusters, anything that looks like a control center. They advanced through corridors that reshaped themselves, fighting against tissue that tried to trap them and organisms that emerged from the walls like antibodies attacking an infection. The Marines burned everything, their plasma cutters turning organic matter into ash. They threw incendiary grenades that filled chambers with fire. They moved with practiced efficiency, clearing spaces with a brutality that would have been criminal in civilized warfare. Thomas found what he was looking for in the central chamber, a massive neural cluster, pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that he recognized as communication signals coordinating the swarm. He placed shaped charges around it with steady hands, his training overriding the horror of standing inside a living enemy. Fire in the hole, he transmitted, and then he was running, his squad racing back toward the boarding pod as the charges detonated. The devourer vessel convulsed, its coordination shattered by the destruction of its neural core. Similar explosions rippled through the swarm as other Marine squads completed their missions. Without coordination, the organic ships became confused, firing on each other, colliding in their attempts to regroup. The hive mind had depended on those neural clusters to maintain unity, and humanity had just driven a knife into its brain. Dante watched the swarm fracture, saw the opportunity, and seized it without hesitation. All forward batteries, concentrated fire on the disorganized sections. Do not give them time to adapt. Burn them until nothing remains. The Relentless poured fire into the chaos, her weapon speaking with endless fury. This was not the elegant warfare of the assembly, measured and restrained. This was annihilation, the complete destruction of an enemy with no quarter asked and none given. It was ugly and brutal and absolutely necessary because the devourers understood only consumption and humanity understood only survival. Behind the battle line, Ambassador Voranth watched from his damaged ship, his chromatic skin shifting through colors that had no translation in human languages. He was witnessing something the assembly had not seen in 12,000 years, war fought without apology, violence embraced as a tool rather than a failure. The humans were not elegant. Their tactics were not sophisticated. But they were devastatingly effective because they understood a truth the assembly had forgotten. Sometimes survival demanded that you become the monster, that you meet cruelty with greater cruelty, that you fight with everything you possess and worry about morality after the enemy is dead. The swarm broke. The remaining devourers retreated beyond the border, their bioluminescence flickering with what might have been shock. They had consumed civilizations, devoured worlds, faced the combined might of the celestial assembly and found it wanting. But they had never faced a species that fought like cornered animals, that embraced their own capacity for destruction and turned it into a weapon that could not be adapted against because it required no elegance, no sophistication, only the will to keep fighting until the last enemy fell. Dante watched them retreat, his expression carved from stone. The battle had lasted 17 minutes. In that time, the Relentless had expended 40% of her ammunition and her hull bore scars from devourer weapons that had managed to penetrate the shields. 3 Marines had died in the boarding actions, their pods destroyed before they could return. But the swarm was broken, driven back, proven mortal. "Damage report," he ordered quietly. "Hull breaches on decks 7 and 12, Okoye reported. Shields at 30%. Ammunition reserves critical. Casualties light, but we have wounded who need medical attention." Dante nodded slowly, then activated the channel to Vorantha's ship. The ambassador appeared on screen, his colors now stable, showing something that might have been awe mixed with relief and perhaps a touch of fear. "You saved us," Voranth said simply. "You did what the entire assembly fleet could not accomplish. You stopped them." "We stopped one attack," Dante corrected. "That swarm will regroup, adapt, come back stronger. This was just the opening move. Then humanity will teach us how to fight." Vorantha's colors shifted to determined shades. "You will show the assembly what we have forgotten. How to be strong. How to survive." Dante thought about the price they had just paid, the brutality required to achieve victory. He thought about the 3 Marines who would never see home again, their lives traded for the survival of strangers who had once called humanity barbaric. He thought about what it meant to be the galaxy's answer to extinction, to be the species others called when their enlightenment failed and only violence remained. "We will teach you," Dante said quietly. "But understand this, Ambassador. Once you remember how to fight, you can never truly forget again. The capacity for violence, once embraced, leaves scars that last forever." He gestured to the battlefield where debris drifted and fires still burned. "Your assembly wanted peace so badly you forgot that peace is not given freely. It must be defended by those willing to do terrible things in its name." Vorantha's colors rippled with understanding. "Then we will learn to do terrible things, because the alternative is extinction." Dante cut the channel and stood, his body aching from tension. Around him, his crew worked to repair damage and tend to wounded. They had won, but victory tasted like ashes because they all understood what came next. Humanity would go to war not for glory or conquest but because someone had to stand between the darkness and the light. Someone had to remember how to bare teeth and sharpen claws. Someone had to be willing to become monsters so that civilization could survive. The Relentless turned toward home, carrying news that would change everything. The galaxy had called, and humanity had answered with fire and blood. Now they would teach the ancient races how to survive, and the lessons would be written in violence that would echo across the stars for generations to come.